much of my material, by the way, Bob, I see popping up all over the place because it goes into the system and it's sort of piped in and begins to be picked up by people. For instance, columnists like Pat Buchanan and James Kilpatrick, every once in a while they'll pick up something of mine. Pat Buchanan had a column not long ago in which he denounced the Trotskyite wing, the neoconservatives of the Republican Party, which I had been speaking about publicly for about 5 years, and which I describe in my book, The Rape of Justice. I give you the whole story about that takeover. And as I say, it's rather flattering to see these things come out in public piecemeal. Mm-hmm. They never really explain it, and of course they never attribute it to my writings, but at least it's getting around, and that's helpful.
Now, we've had this last election, of course. H. Ross Perot did an excellent job, a wonderful job. He only collected 20%, though, because of the fact I think a lot of people in the media themselves always kept saying, well, a third party can't win. And yet we've had a two-party system in this country, but some people say it's just one party. It's the Democrat wing of the Communist Party or the Republican wing of the Communist Party. Could you explain that? Could that be true at all?
Well, it's been true since 1933. You see, you had a man in a wheelchair running for governor of New York named Franklin D. Roosevelt, Delano Roosevelt, and he was the grandson of the most successful opium dealer in Hong Kong named Warren Delano. And, you know, the myth about the great fortunes of this country is that these were hard-working people who saved their money and built important businesses. The fact is, most of the old family money in this country came from dealing in drugs and dealing in slaves, the slave trade and the world opium trade. Mm-hmm. And of course the Delano Roosevelts.
Well, we've become the slaves now. They're still dealing in slaves.
Well, what has happened in this country and over the world is we have reverted, through the world order, we've reverted to the Middle Ages. We have a feudal system now in which you might say futile system because of the way it works, but it's a feudal system in which you have the serfs and you have the lords in the castle, and that's it. And there's not to be anything in between. You see, the great achievement of Western culture, of European culture, was to produce, to move from the Middle Ages into modern times by producing a middle class, a hard-working, thrifty, sober group of people who created businesses and went into production, and they built homes and businesses and so forth, and they brought prosperity. But you see, when you're very rich, you don't like to see prosperity. I mean, what's the good of having money when everybody else has money, you see? So the world order, they want to see everybody poor.
Then they can control them, is that it?
They can control them, and also it's much more satisfying to have a castle and a yacht if you know that all the peasants down there will never have these things and compete with you, you see. Right. So the world order is a monopoly system, and they make their money out of monopolies, and with their monopoly they control the governments, they control the banks, and they set their prices, and it's an extortion system, really, just like the Internal Revenue Service in this country. I traced it right back to the Middle Ages, the black hand of the mafia. And all of their techniques and all of their goals come right out of the black hand.
Well, I'd like to give that IRS a backhand for their black-handedness, to tell you the truth. How do we turn this around? If they allegedly have the power, and money is power, Eustace, and a lot of people say they've got all the money, you know, they have control of the government, they have control of the Republican Party, Democrat parties, they have the bureaucracy. Well, how do you fight a little bit of strength like that?
Well, I have to disagree with you there, Bobby Lee. Money is not power. Knowledge is power. Okay. And unfortunately for the world order people, information is catching up with them. You have channels of mass communication. In fact, if we were to get on national television with 30 minutes of what we're talking about today, you would have a revolution in this country. They can only survive by desperate defensive measures, by keeping us from reaching the American people with the truth, and of course we're fighting to despite of. And that's been what my 50-year career has been, to bring the knowledge that I have and that Ezra Pound imparted to me almost 50 years ago to the American people. And, of course, the reason you had this great turnout in this particular election that just passed was the American people knew something was wrong, and some of this material was leaking out. You know, I've circulated over 1 million books and over 1,000 articles in the past 50 years, and the information is getting there. Even though, to the national media, I still do not exist. I'm a non-person.
And that's one of the things that they try to do, Eustace, isn't it? I mean, it's they either smear people or they don't allow them to be able to present their knowledge. There's so many different ways, techniques that they have that are certainly un-American.
Well, the publishing industry in this country is totally owned. In fact, one of the biggest influences in the publishing industry in this country is the Central Intelligence Agency. They commission and have written and publish and circulate around 200 books of political propaganda a year, which makes the CIA the biggest publisher in the United States, secretly. And, of course, there is no Central Intelligence Agency. It's a branch of the British Secret Intelligence Service, SIS, which was established in 1694 as a necessary adjunct of the Bank of England. So we have never had a government intelligence service. What we have is a branch of the Bank of England, which, as I say, has commissioned and published these 200 books a year of political propaganda, which are distributed to all the universities, and every professor in our universities knows that you have got to use these political propaganda books from the CIA as your teaching textbooks.
You have Zygmunt Brzezinski. He used to be one of the right-hand men of Jimmy Carter. Henry Kissinger with Richard Nixon. These people hardly speak English to some degree, but yet they're controlling, in many cases, the foreign policy of this country. Tell me, foreign policy of this country, I mean, it's really been foreign as far as I'm concerned. Could you explain why?
Well, you're talking now about the field of lecturing and public speaking, which is one of my fields. And interestingly enough, the fees paid to public speakers in the United States are proportioned inversely to how much information they give to the American people. Now, speakers who get between $35,000 and $100,000 per speech get up and give speeches in which they say absolutely nothing. And then when you have people on my level who give you solid information by the ton, we get practically no fees whatsoever because they don't even want us to ever appear in public.
We ask you to support the Bobby Lee and the Eustace Mullins Fund, and we will be bringing you in the future other videos, and we want you to go ahead and purchase as many of Eustace's books as possible. There is a number that you can call right now. It'll be on your screen, and you call and you order some of those books, and this is for the posterity of your children, your family, your future. You need to know. Thanks for being with us today on the Bobby Lee Show, and Eustace Mullins.